You're live.
Thank you. All right, Scott, are you looking to see what's working?
We should actually, for sound, yeah, it's called like.
It's all good? Excellent, great. All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. And I will start out with our land acknowledgement statement. The town of Coalhurst is located in Blackfoot Confederacy territory. We honor the Blackfoot people and their traditional ways of knowing and caring for this land, as well as all Indigenous peoples who have helped shape and continue to strengthen our community. So we'll just move right into the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion for that? Go ahead.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Excellent. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried, thank you. Moving on to the adoption of the previous minutes. Can I get a motion for that?
I move to adopt the minutes.
Excellent. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. So we're just going to skip over the delegation, because we don't have anyone here today, and move right into the business of council, starting with 6.1, which is our council remuneration policy. So I'm going to turn this over to Councillor Coalhurst as the chair of the Policy Bylaw Risk Review Committee.
Thank you. So I move that council adopt the council remuneration policy as submitted and that it be implemented to be retroactive to January 1st, 2023. And I'll just give a little bit of background on this as well. So we've had this ongoing conversation since our organizational meeting last October. And I think it's important to note that we've had much deliberation and discussion about this. As Mayor Martinez stated, I am the current chair of the Policy Bylaw Risk Committee, and we've been diving into this at great lengths. As the chair, I'm happy to provide this background. So the previous remuneration policy, as it stood, left a lot of room for interpretation in what was to be paid or not paid per diems, and had some wording that had not been updated for quite some time and was not up to date with current practices. This council has been incredibly active since taking office, and as a point of transparency, when we do things, internally or externally, we're able to claim a rate for those commitments. However, as we did more last year than in previous years, the budget for remuneration was a bit inflated. So for me, part of setting this rate and changing this policy is not only is the amount the exact same as last year's actuals, but it's a great place to be able to fit it into this year's current budget. And it also ensures that it remains consistent and doesn't fluctuate, resulting in a more stable budget line. As mentioned in the briefing note, we updated some of the language in the policy, such as the changing of the word honorarium to salary, reflecting that council is doing a job and work, as well as changing the definitions of the external commitments and in general tightening it up to remove inconsistencies. So currently with the policy definitions, there were maybe gray areas in terms of external committee compensation being paid directly to an individual member, which then wouldn't show up on our auditing statements. So that's just a process. What happens when members are on external boards, it's not wrong, but we desire to do things differently. And as part of our quest to transparency and sharing more with the residents of Coalhurst, we wish that those external compensation amounts be paid directly to the town and that it offsets the general remuneration expenses. And in the places where the external boards won't do that, the individual councillor would decline that pay as they are receiving money from the town. We want to ensure that council pays equitable, which this will do. And it's one of the values we've identified in our strat plan for this term. And this will also further increase our levels of transparency with citizens because the audited statements will be a true snapshot of the compensation paid. I guess since the release of the agenda, I've had a few people reach out and I've heard concerns in the community about accountability of work. And to that I want to say, we are creating ways, more ways to share with residents what's happening in our internal and external committees. And when they're meeting, we are working on creating aligned policies in terms of reference for internal committees and identifying strategies and implementing important strategic tactics to accomplish work with our external committees we are part of. And to this point, I again say that this is a really hardworking and involved council who have the highest regard for the important work we are accomplishing in Coalhurst. So I guess the other thing that I wanted to say is when I decided to run for office, it wasn't at all on my radar about pay. I don't think I fully understood compensation, and I think that might have been because of our poorly worded policy. But one of the things I've come to understand is that we want people to run for local office and really any level of government. We want to level the playing field and ensure those who wish to run would be compensated for their sacrifice of giving up compensation from their day job or from caregiving or however that looks for each individual. And I think what we're already seeing from municipalities across Alberta is younger people running for office in the field changing a little bit. And I think this policy will help further diversify and allow folks to consider running for office if they desire. And that's really important to me. And I think as times change and people are more involved in what's happening locally and globally, we can steward that involvement by doing everything in their power to ensure folks have not only outlets to be involved in, but to clear a path for individuals who want to run for local office in the future. So I guess to summarize, with all that being said, with the salary being consistent with 2022 actuals and the desire to keep the budget stable moving forward, and the desire from council to do the work we have decided is important, I make this motion.
Excellent, thank you. Any discussion? Go ahead.
So I think Councillor Florence had mentioned that the number was to reflect where it should be, I guess. Was there any, I guess, how did we determine, did we compare ourselves to other municipalities in that review, I guess? And I didn't see that in our package, so I was wondering if there's any consideration to how we relate to our neighbors, I guess, and so on. If that was something that was considered a number or not. That's just one thing I was wondering about.
Thank you. I'm not sure, could we direct this to administration? I don't know.
Through the chair to Council Poetry, there was a review done in 2021, and it had Coalhurst, the council compensation on. It was towards the lower end on the scale of municipalities involved. There was Picture View, Raymond, McGrath, Black Diamond anymore, whatever one of those ones up there is called now, or what it was called. Coaldale, and it was a little. This brings it up into a little bit above that 50th percentile. It's probably more around the 65th percentile in relation to those other municipalities.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Go ahead.
Thank you. Like Councillor Florence spoke about a lot of great topics and points that she raised. We had spoken about this a few times in our policy and bylaw review committee, so we've had quite a few discussions on it. But I think one of the things that we were talking about in there that really stood out to me is the inclusiveness of the opportunity, right? We don't want to have people afraid to be wanting to run for council down the road because it might be a financial hit to them. So we want to make sure that people are compensated fairly for their time. Looking at the numbers with what we had in previous years versus where we're going and what we plan to do with community events and engagement and other opportunities, I don't think this is that far away from where we would be if we were following the previous pay structure. So I don't really see kind of too much fluctuation with that, with the goals that we have, especially with the strategic plan and how we plan on implementing it. I do believe that there's a lot of work that was brought forward from administration on this one, so I wanted to thank them for their efforts. It's been kind of ongoing for a little while, but I think that I can't remember if this is exactly what Councillor Florence said, but it's times are changing, and this kind of brings us up to where we want to be and how we're going to be transparent to the public going forward.
Thank you. Ms. Colville.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation and I appreciate the amount of work that's gone into this. I will say, however, that I cannot agree with the component of the external boards and committees being paid to the town. My understanding was we were looking at this as a way to provide stability within our budgeting, as well as provide fair compensation and equitable compensation to our council. As this number sits, I will be receiving less revenue from this position, doing more work in the upcoming years. I would approve moving forward with it, with the exception that we remove the pieces on external compensation. And as you'll see with my previous report, the work that I do with my external board is that I do a number of different meetings and work with them, that I don't want to discourage any council members to become really actively involved in external boards and committees, because the work that we do with them builds the relationships. It allows us to move forward important items for our community and areas of interest for our community. And if we don't allow for that kind of compensation for people to take that additional work in hand, then I don't think it'll benefit our community.
Thank you. Just to add a little clarification on that, under the external compensation in the draft of the policy there, I guess, it says if a member of council is appointed to an external ad hoc committee or chooses to serve on the executive of a standing committee, and such a board or committee provides compensation for meeting attendance, such remuneration shall be made payable to the member.
Yeah.
So if somebody's serving on a board, they'll be receiving funds from that organization if they were there. I believe that the external compensation was talking about like quarterly board meetings where you're just kind of appointed, but then if you went above and beyond in your position there to try and help out the town or the organization, then that would be kind of like compensation for that extra effort that you're doing.
Just for clarity then, I'll just speak quickly. Some of the work that I had done with Green Acres in trying to move forward housing project for the community of Coalhurst, seniors housing, community housing, I did become part of a provincial advocacy board in order to access funding for our community. And so you're saying that work that I would do then would be outside of the standard that was within this policy?
From my understanding, yes.
The way that I also understand it too is that, yes, I would agree with what Councillor Ackerman is saying. But we also have the other part in here that's about, I don't remember what it's called, extraordinary something or other. Yes, the extraordinary compensation, and that could also be applied to. So if there was a situation, I think like you're speaking about, where it would be like more of that, an additional external board or committee, that this would be part of that.
Okay. So if that's all of our understanding on that section then, was that the intent of it when it was written that way?
Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry, and it was, I guess it came up as a point because we were talking about, yeah, exactly, things like that, or things like, an Alberta Municipalities Committee, things like that are beyond the scope of our external committees, and still having to do something for that.
Okay.
I don't know if this was represented within the policy, but one of the discussions that we had too in terms of our external committees and boards, like looking at actual, like having people be part of them too, would be looking at the time commitments as well, so that people wouldn't have too much or too little too, right? And so if there was one that was particularly more heavy, then we would consider that when we actually do the committee assignments, so that somebody's not taking on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that sort of naturally occurred this last one. And I hope that it will become heavy again for that, as we start looking at housing in our community again, so I appreciate that. And I thank you for that clarity. As I read through it, that was not the understanding that I received, so that I hope that it was one that was universal.
Go ahead.
I had a question about how it relates to meetings such as subdivision development appeal or land property rights tribunals, because those meetings are not regular at all, and they kind of happen sporadically, I guess. What was I don't see, in my interpretation of this, that would fall under the typical council salaries, what the way I read that currently. Is that? I don't know.
Thank you. From, I think, based on the discussions that we're having, we're talking about that being an external ad hoc committee because it doesn't meet all the time. Just like if you look at the second paragraph there, under external compensation, it would be a committee that the council member is appointed to, but doesn't necessarily meet. With regards to the appeal board, it's one of those things where they would contact you and say, are you available? So it's like somebody would have the option to say no or yes to it, right? So I mean, you might get somebody that just keeps saying no if you have the wrong person there.
So the MSTA then would also be part of this. But I suspect that'll become quite a heavy committee work as our community grows, right?
Well, that one I see as being regular, I guess.
Yeah.
Some regular meetings, but like the LARB and the CARB and the all these assessment review ones, you never know how many people are going to be appealing things, right?
That's correct.
It's not as regular. The work that I think is predictable in any sense. Okay, that's good to know. I guess that's.
I'm comfortable with the clarification moving forward with this as it stands then.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of things from myself that I just wanted to add to. Thank you for your really great summary. I think that really kind of highlighted everything I know that's gone into the work for this policy. One of the things that was really important to me is this idea that I think our council really wants to be active in what we do. And knowing that there's a lot of different opportunities that come out, sometimes at varying degrees of time. So sometimes we know a day in advance, sometimes we know a month in advance. And with our previous policy, the way that it was really listed is that we had to seek approval all the time to go to those things. I'm really excited about this because I want to fully participate and be able to do the things that I think is important for this role. And sometimes having that barrier made it a little bit more difficult as well. I think that as we look at the accountability and the transparency from to the public, one of the great things that we have in place now, and I think it'll actually be the first time in our meeting today, is our council reports that will be put out there. And so I think that is also part of that whole idea of transparency around this, that we can show the public what we're doing and also show each other too, and be able to update each other on the different things that we're learning and attending. And so I think that for me is really important. And also I really agree with that whole idea around the budget and having this be more stable and knowing exactly what our budget is going to be moving forward for this. Because it can vary so much depending on how active the council is or what's kind of happening. And I think that this does provide more of that stability in that sense. So I'm very happy to see where this policy came, and there was a lot of work that went into it from members of council as well as our administration. And so thank you for the work that you've done. Is there any further discussion? Go ahead.
I just had a question about so when we look at extraordinary compensation under the full day and the half days, it looks like from our current rate, they've been bumped just slightly, I guess. Were these, it almost just seems like they're rounded up, I guess, but was there any rationale, I guess, into picking those numbers that went into this, I guess, is what I'm wondering about.
I'm not sure. Go ahead.
For the mayor, say Council Poultry, a bit of rounding, taking away, something in 93 cents or 16 cents, and then also looking at municipalities and kind of where they put those figures at. So a bit of mix and match, a bit of rounding.
So that would put us in a similar range, I guess, as the 60 or 50, kind of in the middle of that.
Correct.
Right. Thank you.
It's nice to be in the middle of the pack.
All right. If there's
I just think it's important for the public to know that we're not trying to use this as a cash grab. I guess really is what I'm trying to say is that we're based on our analysis that our administration has done. We're just looking at keeping it fair without being consistent with other municipalities. Is what I'm hearing. So.
Great. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to the FCM convention attendance, and so this is something that I am bringing forward. So I move that myself, Mayor Montina, and one councillor be approved to attend the 2023 Federation of Canadian Municipalities Convention. So one of the reasons why I brought this forward is through some of our discussions that we've had just regarding our membership and involvement with different associations and looking at how we can best leverage them to help move our strategic goals forward. And so FCM is one that we have not attended since we've been in office. And this is something that as we're looking at this, I think that there's a lot of different opportunities with this as a way to connect obviously with other municipal officials, elected officials, to gain an understanding of the issues on a national scale. And also to continue or consider setting up some meetings with maybe some other municipalities that are doing some kind of innovative projects so that we can see what they're doing in other parts of the country that maybe we can bring here. And so really looking at this as an opportunity again to be strategic in our approach. And there is some of that, that networking component that goes along with this. So that was one of the things that I wanted to move forward with this. So this year it is being held in Toronto, and you will see that on here. We have, with the help of our lovely administration, put this together. Just looking at this from the good governance side of things and being able to network with other people. Again, I think this goes back to the fact that there always is costs with this, but the real benefit for this is finding creative solutions that we're facing locally and then building those relationships. And so that is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this forward here. So I'll open it up to discussion. So does anyone have anything that they'd like to discuss? Go ahead.
I appreciate you bringing this forward. I think this is a very important conference for us to be a part of. I think that they have, over the past few years, they have increasing interest in smaller municipalities. And that is another arm of funding for our community, the federal government. And so I think that that is a value for us to sort of be a voice at that table and to network and learn from what they have to teach us.
Excellent, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you for bringing this forward, Valentina. I just want to echo what Councillor Caldwell had mentioned, that I think that I know we haven't attended as far as we've been elected, but it has been part of previous council's attendance, and many municipalities do participate with this, and so it is a good opportunity to learn and understand how we can tax grant dollars to our community through learning from others, and I think that investment really helps everybody more broadly in our community to have a better life, really, because we will have better facilities and better parks and whatever we get grant money for, or ways to manage and then deliver services right up here, right? So I think that is a value to our community. So.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Acklands.
Thank you. I look at that price tag and I see it as quite a bit. I'm almost wondering if it would almost be better to just maybe send one person the first year and just kind of get a lay of the land. And then if that turns out like it's an all right thing, then possibly look at more people down the road. I think even when we look at Alberta municipalities, the first year that we went, we were just we didn't really know what to expect. We didn't really have a game plan. We didn't really leverage it for our advantage. So I think that, if we're going to look at something like this, I would like to see kind of some thought put into, what the plan's going to look like if we can set up any sort of meetings. And then just kind of like that reporting back that we talk about, right? Keep people accountable and make sure that the information does make it to the whole group.
I disagree. I think there's a lot of learning to be done. I think that their focus, like on climate resiliency and housing and these kinds of things, are really important for our community. I think that when you have all of these breakout sessions, it's difficult for one person to be able to take all of that in, and it's difficult to do the degree of networking that we can do. And I know that anytime I've been to, in the past, as I mentioned with Green Acres, in the past I have attended a sort of a federal housing conference, and was able to tell everybody the story of Coalhurst and our housing needs. And so it's important that we put a strong voice out there. And these are some important things out there, and there are some great budget lines for housing and things like that right now, right? So although I respect the the concern for the budget, but if we can bring money into our community for these kinds of projects, then in effect we're saving funds, right?
For discussion, go ahead.
No, thank you. Yeah, so I guess as much as I believe that training and networking is important, I am struggling a little bit with the price tag too. And it's only for 2 people. I would respectfully question the need to go that far for a conference. There's much better tools for learning and networking than a conference out east, in my opinion. As the location of the conference rotates from east to west-ish, I would prefer to see us develop a specific strategy that we're talking about, which is great. And then plan to go next year when it's closer to us. Actually, for this year, I would rather see a plan with a specific strategy for council to go to both RMA and Alberta municipalities locally, where the impact and networking will have a greater effect. And I think that speaks to the next motion on the agenda, which is policies for strategies for member associations. And I think that's a really great policy to develop. I guess I go back and forth on this, but I have a tough time believing, that people in Stratford care what's happening in Coalhurst and vice versa. And I'm not trying to make light of networking opportunities. I just don't necessarily see the value. And then I guess at our last policy bylaw and review committee under the direction of council, we began a discussion on council professional development policy and had discussions around the parameters of that policy and feel we should first develop the policy as well as the policy below in the agenda if it passes and go from there for the remainder of next year, this year and next year. And I guess I just also to be clear, I'm not vehemently opposed, especially in the future. I would just like us to further consider a strategy or tactic that we wish to accomplish with our member associations, specifically with FCM in this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So when I first originally brought this forward, I didn't have the dollar figures associated with it, and that was something that again received support from administration to actually go look at that. The more that I've thought about this, I think that it is a great opportunity, and I think it's something that we need to continually look at. However, in my mind, I think it goes back to this idea of a plan and really being able to strategize in terms of what we want to do with this. This conference is in May, if I remember. Yes, May.
25th to 28th.
And that's actually, in talking with Carlene, we talked a little bit about how sometimes even with like Alberta municipalities preparing months in advance for that, right, to use it strategically. And I feel like we might be kind of getting down to the wire this year. Regardless, I think I would love for us to develop a plan, and that's what the next motion is really looking at, so that we can look at this for future years. I think that there's great things that can happen for it. I don't know if we're there yet. I guess that's kind of where I'm at right now today. And hearing all of everything that you're saying. I think into the future, if we can kind of develop more of this policy around what our association participation looks like, we can then use that to say, like, strategically it makes sense to go here because of this. So regardless of where it is, so say it is further out east, we just kind of know that that's what we're setting ourselves up for future years. And so I think that while I think it's a great opportunity, I'm just not sure that it would make sense given where we are with our planning and everything right now.
I have to say that when I did attend that federal housing conference, we came home with $50,000 grant money to write a business plan for Coalhurst, which is why I was really excited at the opportunity to get out there and talk again. I appreciate what you're saying, Bill, that it is brand new and it's that short of notice, and maybe we do need to put it on the agenda so that we can plan for that. Maybe we should, can we not get credit cards that have things like air miles and, so that we can do these things with a little more, being a little more budget conscious, right? Because there's some big players out there. And when you can get out and share the story of your community, it's quite remarkable how you can access support, right?
I feel like the way I see how fast we're moving now in terms of just the way everything is kind of coming together of all the things that we wanted to see. And I feel like there's so much growth happening behind the scenes that I'd love for us to get to a really great place where we could just take this and grab it and do something really, really great with it. I think this year we could kind of do that, but I'm not fully confident that we would be able to leverage it to the best of our abilities at this point in time. So, is there any more discussion? Go ahead.
I hear that, like, well, yeah, we don't have a great strategy in place, I guess. But, I also feel the other side of that and saying, well, if we don't, I guess, yeah, we can wait, of course. We can always wait. That's government, just wait. We don't make decisions, we wait. But right, so is there something at this conference that we might miss next conference? I don't know. But I feel like we've been missing out on this opportunity for years already, and it's yes, what's one more year, I guess. So it's not. I don't think it's. I'm not prepared to fight this battle to the death. I don't. Right, but when it was brought forward, I just thought.
Finally,
yes. Right. That was my impression. Right. So so I think conferences are ways to accelerate learning and in ways that and growth in ways that yes, you can do courses and stuff like that, but usually, those are like, courses are past history, right? They're past history. Whereas conferences are the cutting edge, right? The new things. So, if you're not there, then you're just following along with the past, really, right? So, that's how I see conferences a little bit, maybe in my perspective. So that's one reason I would be in support of sending a person to this conference now, even despite not having a clear strategy in place, really. So, because out of that, we might maybe there's someone there who has strategies, for example, but right, just because you don't have a clear strategy about it, I guess it shouldn't inhibit us from acting. I guess that was the whole thing about we just talked about this council remuneration. So it's a bit ironic, really, that we didn't want to hinder people by by having to get approval for this and approval for that. And of course, this is a big expense, so we do need approval for it. But I think it'll be valuable still. I mean, maybe it's not quite as valuable if we had a clear strategy, but I think it still will be. I guess was my impression of it. So, and I'm not going to go. So someone else can if we do approve it, but I'm not going to be able to make it if we do. So I'm coming from an unbiased position, I guess that's what
I was vowing to go. I already know the people that I want to go stand in front of and start talking about Coalhurst, because that's what I am, is I'm a really strong advocate, and that's what I do, right? But I'm okay with the decision. I just was really excited when I read that, and I thought,
we don't need to see it.
we can get in there. We can get in there, and we can start talking to some of the big players and sharing the story about our small community and what we need, because we have needs. We do. And we do have a strategy. We've got a great strategic plan that talks about housing and talks about environmental sustainability, talks about these things, right, that we want to move forward on. And you're right, we're moving rapidly. We are, and we're growing rapidly.
Yeah, I just wonder, I know that this is one of the big ones, but I also, I know that there is also, I can't remember what that one is called. There's a recreation conference that's, I can't remember what that one is, but that's another one too, right? Where maybe that's something that if we're looking at the whole recreation component, maybe we should be considering that. So I guess my thought is just that everything, it's kind of ad hoc, right? Things kind of just come up to us and I'd love for us to kind of look at this and say, okay, these are the things that we have this year. And strategically, what makes the most amount of sense for us to do this year, and then to balance that obviously with the budget and what we've allocated towards that. And so that's why, I guess that's kind of where, I absolutely appreciate and hear what you're saying in terms of the conferences. I totally agree. But I guess it's just a matter of I'm sure that something else is going to come up right away too. That maybe isn't it's obviously not at this level, but I don't know. Yeah.
I think I don't know if we'll ever get that full year kind of picture though, because some conferences, I guess, I don't know, if we ever will have that clear picture. I don't know how we get there, I guess, unless we know every single conference that exists, I guess.
But I think that we would be able to look at more at our what we want to achieve, right?
And
then look at it, let's see if there's any conferences that are good for that, or that would kind of move those things forward, I suppose.
Because I know you go on some of these websites and they don't even have anything, is there a conference this year? I don't know, because the website, it's impossible to tell. They just, this is the past conference, but they still don't have anything prepared until, it could be only months beforehand, right? So if it's a regular one, I guess maybe it's easy to plan for it. And maybe we only target regular ones then, I guess, but.
Yeah. So those are just my thoughts anyways. Is there any further discussion? Go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, losing my train of thought here. I was thinking if FCM is important to us down the road, maybe it would be worthwhile to send somebody out there and see if there's anyone. I know when we talk about Alberta municipalities convention, there's often talk about Coalville lining up so many meetings with ministers and stuff, so it's like maybe if you go out there and try and seek out some of those communities that are networking and leveraging it to their best ability, to have some of those contacts for how you guys accomplish this, or what are you guys accomplishing, or what's worked and what hasn't. I think that can be beneficial. Looking at this right now, I don't think sending 2 without a plan would be a good thing, but I mean, sending 1 to get the lay of the land and kind of just oversee like, how can we best maximize our efforts for future years? I think that could possibly be a good thing. I guess it just comes down to, is this a convention that we're going to want to be looking at in future years, right? Is there benefits to that or not? I know when we were talking about urban municipalities, there's been some talk of, is it worth it or is it not worth it? And then I guess if you come with a game plan and you want to leverage it, it would be a lot more worthwhile than just going out there and just talking apples with people.
Yeah, I think it's really important though that we have to keep in mind when we're looking at this, like it's not always right up there in your face. Our wetlands project came from a conversation I had with somebody many years ago. And I stayed in touch with that person. She sent me an email and said, I'm now in this position within the government, can we talk? Right? So I mean, it's that networking, it's that advocacy, it's telling the story of Coalhurst over and over and over again about what we need and who we are, right? Like that is, to me, is absolutely, there's some great learning, but it's the networking, it's being able to get in front of people who have money and make decisions and sharing the story of Coalhurst. And that's, I mean, at the end of the day, most of the money that we've got into this community is because somebody said, oh yeah, that's Coalhurst, I remember that, right? So that is, like, that's not one of those, it's not a super tangible outcome, but it's probably the most critical outcome for these kinds of things.
That's a great point.
Right.
I just have a question for administration, like, is it, like, we talk about like setting up meetings and things like that. Would we, in this time frame, be able to do that, to set up like meetings potentially with ministers or other people that would be good?
Ms. Betteridge, would you be comfortable answering that since you have much more experience with that side of the process?
Of course, yes. Thank you, Mayor Martina. I think at this point of time, perhaps not, we might not have enough time, but we can certainly probe the question.
Okay.
Yes. And we can do that successfully by aligning some of our strategic plan with an ask. And that's a good way we can advocate for the town of Coalhurst, as we mentioned, but we can, at council's direction.
Okay, great, thank you.
The other consideration, if I can add to that, thank you, would be federal budget is coming down. FCM is doing an analysis, and there may be aspects of the federal budget that would have application to the town of Coalhurst. Most of what comes out that would be focused on municipalities is generally going to be focused on Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, because that's coincidentally where the voters are. But there will be elements of the budget, as FCM is predicting, they're actually going to be for what would be rural or other municipalities as well. So if something comes out of the budget that has very key strategic application, that might be another reason. That said, the federal government does make a bilateral agreement with each individual province. So some of the lobbying effort also has to be applied to whatever government is in power in Edmonton to ensure that they're negotiating the best deal that they can for other municipalities as well. So it's very much a two-pronged approach.
Thank you.
I think the two big focuses are climate resiliency and housing right now, is that. And those are two of our big strategic plans, and they're must-dos for us. It's not, these aren't just coasts, right? But yeah, we have other avenues. I've been already searching MCAP for some of the funding and some of the opportunities for them, right? So we have other avenues if this one is successful.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any further discussion? I feel like I'm always a swing vote sometimes here, guys. And I've heard some very good points today. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. So we're going to move on now to the participation in associations policy. So moving down here. So I moved that the council of the town of Coalhurst direct the CAO to draft a participation in associations policy and further the draft policy be forwarded to the policy, bylaw, and risk review committee by May 15th, 2023. So again, this goes back to what we were just talking about with the previous motion. Looking at more of a plan on engagement on how we're actually going to go about participating within the associations that we're part of. We've had some discussions about Alberta municipalities and our attendance there in the past and what that's looked like and how we may be better able to leverage that into the future with different meetings and things like that. And so with this policy, I just wanted to take a look at this to kind of have more of that proactive approach rather than reactive in the sense that these are the things that are kind of coming up, should we do it? And so I'd like to send it or to have a CEO work on that and have a go to that committee, just so that we can create that annual plan that would also consider, how many people are we sending, who are the representatives for this, so that we can help articulate that so that we know what that looks like for us as a council. So I'm going to just open that up for any discussion. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a great motion to bring forward and a great policy to develop. I think it's the intent of creating a policy around the tactics in that annual plan for the member associations. It's awesome. And as I stated in the previous discussions, I think it's a very important policy to develop when it comes to our strategies or our plans and to get the absolute most out of the associations we are part of. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Any additional discussion? Go ahead. Did you have discussion?
No.
Okay, great.
I just-
Oh, you do? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I thought I was going to go first. Yeah, so would this policy be looking at, how we discussed like bringing highway twinning association into our, when I look at municipalities, FCM, RMI, like those are kind of different to say twinning, highway 320. But I feel like it could encompass that potentially, right? Because if we're saying Alberta municipalities is strategically aligned with this, so we should be attending it, you could apply that lens to any group, I guess. What, so really, I guess I'm curious about association. I guess the reaching of this, and it'll be very nice to see how it comes out in the end, really, I guess, so.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? Because it could reach a lot of different things. I guess when you were saying like Highway 320, and I think because, I think because we kind of decided to participate in that this year, it wasn't one of our regular or standing boards or committees that we had at this point, that could fall under there. And so I guess I would kind of, again, I'm very excited to see how this comes out and to see what that looks like. Because I think it's also too, one of the things that I actually just, when I was at the Mayors and Reeves meeting the other day, I was talking to the mayor of Vulcan about, it must be, is it Sadewa? Is that right?
Yes.
The water.
Yeah.
And the waste
energy.
Yeah, waste. And he had indicated that at one point in time we were members of that, and we no longer are. And so I think that there are some of those types of organizations out there that maybe we were part of at one point in time and no longer are, and don't even know about them. Because when he said that, I was like, oh, I don't know. Like that was one that like I had kind of heard of, but wasn't aware that we were part of that before. And so maybe that is something that we kind of consider with this as we move forward with the policy as well. Other discussion? If there's none, discussion? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to have a list of what groups are out there, right? Just even if there's kind of a running list of, hey, these are some of the ones in the region, and these are ones historically we've been members of, or these are ones that we're currently members of, right? And then, I mean, as our needs change as a municipality, we can look at, are these aligned with what we're trying to accomplish? Because I mean, it'd be great to be in everything, but financially there are costs to things, so it could cost money. There's also time commitments, right? But it's just finding the best use of our resources, right? So if we could have a list or something with a policy that kind of speaks about the opportunities that are out there, I think that would be beneficial. Because I know when we first came in, we were in a situation where we didn't even know where a lot of these things were or how a lot of them existed or anything, right?
Reading through this, I'm not sure if it's not clear to me, I guess. Is this a council for or is this a policy for, both council, the town, and administration, type associations? And, because that might look different than just, say, a town and council, or the town and administration, because I know, like, for example, we're part of the, isn't there a peace officer organization or something like that? And like, we don't engage with that on a regular basis, but our staff does, because they use it as a resource. And, for example, right, so that it's a question, I guess, that's not quite addressed by this brief in front of me, so.
I was looking at this from council. Like, and then, because I think that would become an administrative policy in terms of how that's dealt with, but this is solely about us as council.
And the town as a whole.
Yes.
I don't think we need identifiers when a policy comes from council, that this would be specific to council. Do we need that an identifier on there, or? Oh, okay.
Through your worship to Councillor Caldwell, yes, we actually, well, the policy format's exactly the same. We've created consistency across the organization to clarify whether policy is governance or administration or operation.
Yes,
Is actually important. And so to the deputy mayor's point, when I read this brief conversation with the mayor on it, my mind immediately went to being a policy of the governance body. Administratively, we would look at things a little differently.
You're right, and I apologize. I meant within the body, within the text itself, within the brief itself. I think we identified it as governance, but within each of these, within each of the briefs that we bring forward, we don't have to identify this as governance versus this administration. Not any longer. I believe that we have administration that will do that for us now. And we're so grateful. Thank you.
Well, it's based on the direction of council, so thank you. In each of the policies, there will be a statement as to who the policy applies, to who the policy applies, and it will be stated this policy that applies to council.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Thank you. I wanted to say, just as I read this and the rationale, it's to me, it's really talking about the strategy of non-use for municipal associations, which there's only 3 that are representing our municipality. When we talk about, like, do we see value in being a part of Highway 3 twinning or Old Man Watershed, things like that, like, I think that's a very important conversation to have. But I see it as a different conversation than this, and maybe one that even goes with, like, our organizational meeting and the appointments like that, as we set priorities for the year. And also just, you know, through the years as council has ebbed and flowed, you can see that, right? How they've been a part of different things like Highway 3 twinning, or the I'm gonna say it wrong, SAWI, things like that. But I see this as being specific to those 3. And what tactics and strategies we're going to use as a part of those to be able to further our strategic plan.
Yeah.
But anyway, looking forward to seeing it too.
Yes.
As the one who's drafting this, a little bit of clarity and direction would be greatly appreciated, because I have heard specific to these 3 organizations, which are lobby organizations. They're what we would call a functional specific policy community, that they have a very defined purpose, versus something that's issue specific, something about housing, or something that's geographic specific in Highway 3, because the approach is going to be slightly different with each. As Councillor Ackerman's identified, there's limited resources. So we can list all of the organizations or associations, and then it's a matter of fighting for which one. The approach that I was considering is taking your strategic plan and working backwards from your strategic plan. What organizations are going to check the most boxes? That if you attend AB Munis, you attend RMA, you attend FCM, what do we take to these organizations? What's the value? What's the advantage? What's the strategy around that? But it does require a bit of a conversation as well about what is the purpose of serving on Highway 3? What are the benefits and the advantages? Tying it into the strategic plan is one direction, and allows council to make judgments based on the value that's going to bring relative to the strategic plan, but in conjunction with a limited budget. So if you want the policy just to be about AV Munis, RMA, and FCM, that's easily accomplished. If you want to broaden, that is also easily accomplished. But it's gonna just take a little bit more work. So does council have a preference? Do you want a starting point? Do you want to just jump in with both feet?
What's that?
Yeah, we'll stop first.
Thank you, Mayor. My thoughts are, as Council Florence mentioned, if we can focus on these three with this policy, I think that would be great because these are very targeted approaches that we're taking with some of the other groups and associations that we're members of. They're kind of ongoing things, so it's kind of, we have different levels of involvement in them and then we bring back information, whereas these ones are going to be, we have to work with a target and go and make the most of it, right? Whereas a lot of these other organizations, with the exception of the executives, a lot of it's just kind of information being handed down and then kind of making decisions as a greater board from time to time, right? So if it was up to me, I would like to see these three in this policy. The other associations, we can either have a conversation when it comes to the organizational meeting, or possibly even, maybe down the road, maybe we have another policy that's more of those less policy focused, but more goal focused associations.
Thank you.
Yes, that's interesting. I was gonna say it a little differently, that you could look at it broadly and say, we need to be part of our associations, organizations that align with our strategic plan, and different organizations should be reviewed and brought forward to be evaluated against it. But then it's not really saying as much, I guess, as maybe we want it to. If you kind of water it down, potentially is the trade-off, right? So I guess I'm wondering what the strategy is regarding these three organizations that we want outlined in the policy. For me, I'm trying to figure that out. What is the policy going to? Is it going to be broad in terms of these? Because if we're saying we should be part of this organization because of this, and then is it anything more than that? I guess is that my understanding? Maybe we don't know yet, but that's why I'm hearing it to me.
This is gonna have to be really broad. We have to have really, really broad, and sort of generic. This is why, because they change from year to year, right? And we gain information, or depending on what's the issue at hand, right? Unless we're prepared to change our policy annually, right? Each of these organizations, the focus is going to change annually sometimes based on provincial budgets or federal budgets or whatever's going on at the time, whatever's hot in the moment. But there's always the underlying network and learning from other municipalities, and there's always going to be that. So whatever, if we have to have a rationale for why we're a part of these, they have to be broad and they have to be generic, or we have to be prepared to get in there and change it constantly, right? I'm all about transparency and having it put out to the community that this is why we're a part of these kinds of things, but we don't want to hamstring ourselves as well by making it too narrow of a reason.
Actually, I like kind of what you're saying there in a sense of like, this is what we do to connect it back to the strategic plan. And then maybe there's another process, right, where we have to actually go and say, okay, well, what makes sense? So that's where the plan or the strategy for the year comes into play, because the policy says that we're gonna do these things. It's gonna tell us what we're going to do, right? And then we have to have that conversation. And so in my mind, it does need to be much more broad, to kind of look at how we would actually accomplish that. So I think that you're right too, in a sense of that, maybe FCM is doing something that we really need to go to one year, and maybe we want to send more than 2 people. I don't know, right? And to kind of look at it from that perspective.
Or if there's a budget line item that says, yes, we need to find a way to tackle that. We need to find our way into that money, right?
Yeah. For me, it was much more about this. It's about the strategy and the planning of it rather than approaching things in an ad hoc manner.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what my buy-in was, the thought that, if we have sort of a process around how we're going to these and sort of some of the broad rationale. That's what I was thinking was what we needed on these, not very specific, we're going to gain this A, B, C, right?
Is that helpful?
Absolutely.
Maybe I should have lost a little more of my voice. Just a little more.
No, it does provide clarity, your worship, members of council. It certainly permits greater focus. And as I say, looking at the policy through the lens of the strategic plan is a great way of creating the foundation of the policy, so that you know you can target for something like something on housing. We know that we have to have a conversation through AD Unis, but we also know we have to have a conversation through FCM as well. If you're looking at infrastructure, you need to be having a conversation with all three organizations or through all three organizations. This is where the connection points are with the other governments being federal and provincial. Because all of these three organizations are lobby associations. Their job is to lobby the provincial or the federal government. So how do we connect into that? And I think the vehicle is through the strategic plan. Just establish a policy around the strategic plan. This comes up. We've heard about this coming up at RMA. We need to be there to support our rural brothers and sisters in the fight for X. This is coming up at FCM. This is a federal initiative, dollars for whatever. We need to be fighting with our brothers and sisters across the country for those resources as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Yeah, if there's none, I will call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our council reports. And I will start maybe with Councilor Atkinson.
Sure. First off, thank you to our administration for putting together the lovely template that I'm sure the public will be seeing in the agenda packages if they look at the agenda packages down the road. But first, I'd like to, for recognitions, I'd really like to thank the town and the RCMP and even members of the public for coming to the open house on community safety that was held last night. I know administration probably had a lot of work facilitating this. The RCMP, I thought, put on a great presentation, and there was a lot of members in the public that gave up some of their time to spend it with us. So I am very thankful and appreciative of that. As for our meetings and events that I've attended, on March 2nd, I had South Crow's executive meeting. We're coming to the financial year end, which is at the end of March. So there's a lot of just tying up a lot of projects. You know, if there's grant money that needs to be spent before the end of the year, they're trying to find ways to leverage that so that it's not lost. Our next executive meeting will be about the operational plans for next year. So they had a draft of the operational plan that they had passed around. And then we're gonna kind of review it as an executive and then bring it to the full board for the April meeting. And then to follow that up, last night I attended the community safety public open house. For my numbers, there was about 21 community members and 4 members from the RCMP side. We had 3 local and 1 presenting from K Division. And I thought it was great to raise concerns with the RCMP, provide some information to the public, and just an opportunity for people to feel heard. Upcoming meetings, I have the South Crow executive meeting for the operational plan on March 13th, and then we have the open house for the wetlands project on March 14th, and then policy bylaw risk review committee on March 20th. In April, I have the Economic Development Alberta conference, and then just another update is there's South Crow has the Southern Alberta Economic Development Forum happening on March 30th in Lethbridge. I'd love to attend this, however, there's a $80 registration fee, so I'd have to get that approved within the training budget, so if somebody would be.
I'll make that motion.
That would be awesome, thank you.
So I move that you are approved to attend the,
Southern Alberta Economic Development Forum,
great, on what date?
March 30th.
On March 30th.
I just have a question.
Yes.
Given that we just passed our remuneration policy, do we have to make this motion?
Because it is for the actual
Registration.
fee,
Oh, okay,
that's what it would be in reference to.
okay, thank you.
So I guess that's so that we will pay his registration.
I don't know if anyone else would like to attend that, but it's looking.
Can you provide what it's called again?
Southern Alberta Economic Development Forum. And that's being held in Lethbridge on March 30th.
Is community features a part of that as well?
You know, off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure they are.
Yes, thank you. So I move that council approve Councillor Ackerman's Southern Alberta Economic Development Forum in Lethbridge on March 30th, 2023. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? That's carried, thank you.
And then that's it for my report.
Excellent. Councillor Florence.
Thank you. So for recognition, I just want to echo what Councillor Ackerman said. Just so many engaged citizens who took their time out of their evening to come participate. That was awesome. It was great to have so many intentional questions for the RCMP and to have them be able to answer, and everybody just left happy, which was great. There was no yelling, so that's good.
That's important.
You never know with open houses. Anyway, no, it was really great, so thank you for that. And then to the Public Works team for all their hard work with clearing snow. Wanted to give some recognition too. For the last little bit since our last meeting, I've had the Community Futures monthly board meeting. It's business as usual. And then again, the RCMP open house. And then for upcoming meetings, there's a regional training for all the community futures. So there's community futures like Fort McLeod and in, I shouldn't say the places because I'll probably say them wrong, but they're everywhere in Alberta. So they'll all be coming together for this free training. And so that's this weekend. And then upcoming is also the wetlands open house. I'm sorry, not this weekend, on March 14th is the wetlands open house. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Reporter.
Thank you. With the provincial budget coming out recently, it was great to see that Coalhurst High School is funded for an upgrade in the budget. So I'd just like to thank our provincial government and our MLA, Joseph Shaw, and our school division leadership team for advocating for that and working diligently to bring that to our community. I also attended the RCMP information and community safety thing yesterday as well, and so going together Councilor Lawrence and Councilor Harkins. I'd also like to recognize Jess Walton for providing free ongoing fitness classes every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on the community center. And I'd like to recognize people who go the extra mile in our community to clear their neighbor's sidewalk from snow. For meetings and events, I attended the Assessment Review Board training last week. It was every morning for the whole week, and passed my exam well above the mark. And so
It's remarkable the number of people who don't. So well done.
yeah, you need 70%, so I got 90 of them. So I'm not qualified to sit on LARBs and CARBs. If you don't know what the difference is, the Land Assessment Review Board is for like how fourplexes or less have residential type things, and then the CARB is for like more like commercial, like bigger stuff. So the CARBs are chaired by a provincial person, and the LARBs could be chaired by anybody, including myself, actually.
So an assessment review board, is there someone who requests a review of their tax assessments?
That's right, so taxes.
And they put forward a complaint, it allows them to come forward and be heard and have the board assess that, right?
Yeah, it's a bit different than the subdivision appeal board, I realized. Like, I thought they were kind of similar, and I know I did the training for that, and I know Scott used to have them, but it's like it's an adversarial board, it's called, so you have a relationship with, you're not there, it's almost like a legal thing, kind of like you're like, quasi-legal, but it's not, you don't have to follow the rules of law, you can just do whatever you want, apparently. not whatever, but as long as it's.
I'm gonna hope that's not an accurate.
As long as it's fair and equitable, right? That's what it comes down to, right? So fair and equitable process. had the ORSC Board of Directors meeting on March 2nd. And one of the things that came out of that was actually this new work order task tracking module that integrates through the GIS system that Public Works could use to generate work orders on certain types of things to say, this hydrant has a leak, take a photo, upload it, add the ticket, assign it to so-and-so, they do the work, upload a photo, it's fixed, kind of thing. So, and then you could see a work order history on that asset, right? So it's kind of an interesting thing. I know our director of operations are just started using something like that. So I don't know if it was through the GIS or not, but this is available apparently already, or as a new service that could be used potentially. So might be worth connecting with them and see if it's, for administration to do. There's a new PR article regarding campground, which was interesting. It was circulated at members of council. And then one thing that came up was the 15-minute cities discussion. And I know this was in the news recently because people were saying, oh, the government's going to lock us into these 15-minute zones or something like that. That's what it came down to. Like, you can't travel more than 15 minutes from your house because so there's the negative aspect of it, and people were protesting that, not understanding that that it actually kind of, Coalhurst is a 15-minute community by nature of itself.
So I moved here.
Right, so it's not a particularly new approach or anything, but they were just saying it's nice to have people talking about planning at least.
Well, I'm not sure planning that way. It's kind of a Hunger Games type of planning. No.
People are thinking about it, I guess, right? And they're engaging with their land use bylaws and stuff. So they actually shared a story of this one municipality that had engaged an outside party to redo their land use bylaw, and they paid like over $100,000 to this company, and they just totally blew everything out of the water. And we're just like, nobody gets grandfathered in. Everybody's in non-compliance now, like the whole town. It was ridiculous. So they're saying, oh, it's a mess in other places, but don't worry, we got you covered. So that's the story. And then, RCP Public Open House and MSCA this morning, we just reviewed one application for solar panels, which is pretty standard in this, right? So we'll have to review our land use bylaw to get that added in as a permitted use. So we don't need to review those anymore at MSCA conclusion. So we talked with our planner, and she mentioned that we will be looking at the land use bylaw later this month, I believe, right? So in the next few meetings, I will be attending Agenda Setting Committee, Wetlands Open House Committee of the whole MSD, and the Recreation and Culture Committee. And then on April 20th, I signed up for that Coalbell Operations Net Zero Building Grand Opening, which I thought looks really interesting based on the poster. You might have all seen it, but I was the one who maybe signed up. But so I'll be attending that. And then I was also seeking approval to attend the 2023 CPAA conference from May 1st to 3rd. The registration and hotel expenses are provided through the ORSC executive. So the additional cost will be the travel disbursements. And no longer remuneration, since that's included now. So
I can make that motion. I move that Deputy Mayor Potry is approved to attend the 2023 CPAA conference, which is May 1st to 3rd. It says costs would include travel disbursements and I guess remuneration, but that's covered already.
yeah. Because we changed the policy today, so.
There you go. Would this not be one of the exceptions outside of the?
Well, it says conferences are, I don't know, that's up, I don't know how we interpret that, I guess.
Are you attending as a member of the executive of ORSC? Probably, you're attending because you're a member of the executive of
Well,
ORSC, so this would be outside of that then, outside of our. That's a tough one because you're kind of trying to determine now are you losing revenue when you go to these things or not, right?
Yeah, I don't know how that looks, I guess, like with
Thank you. Could this not qualify under like professional development and then just be kind of that training money for the expenses to travel to these conventions? If somebody else is paying the accommodations and the registration costs, I think that it would just be kind of like a drop in the bucket from the training expense, right? Be associated with that, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's how, like, I guess that's kind of how I was viewing this, is it was a part of that. Like, so are you saying in terms of, like, is this an extraordinary situation?
Well, I'm saying, he's saying that the per diem costs, that's a non-issue now because we just rolled in our new policy.
That's the way I understood the policy.
And in reading the policy, because he's attending this and he's a member of the ORSC executive, my read would be then that, no, this doesn't fall within the policy. The standard
That's
conferences
true,
would
it's
be the
not-
exceptional.
You're right, it's not standard then, right? Because I'm not assigned to that.
I guess that, like, with this though, could anybody go to this conference,
Yes.
right? So I guess I kind of look at it in a sense that this is part of, this doesn't apply to that, right? Like, it's not a specific thing where you're like, I'm going to, like, I'm going to this thing to advocate for this, whatever, right? Which is, I think, what you were talking about with that other, like, that housing one that you were talking about. Like, to me, this is like you're being given an opportunity because you're part of that. If they were to provide you with remuneration because you were part of the executive, you could accept that. But if they're not going to, then there is no additional remuneration for it.
Like Council Archimedes is not getting remuneration for the economic
Right,
conference.
right, it's just like if we go to Alberta municipalities or if we go to FCM, that's just part of our salary.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And but if maybe, I don't know, if there's like a specific task force that came out of that, and we decided that you were going to sit on it, that is exceptional. Right? Okay.
I don't know. We're testing this out for the first time, I guess.
Well, there we
right?
go. Okay, any,
Yeah,
And I think that was where my concern was, is that it may limit people's ability. Because when you do leave your work to go to do these things, you've lost your revenue from work, right? And so that's where it kind of hampers people. When you attend these kinds of things, that's when the intangible networking and the, right.
but I think that was going based off of just, which was wraps up in a second. I think that's going back based off of, again, the actuals from last year. Of looking at that, and that took into account going to Alberta municipalities, anything like that. And so that was kind of how that number came about.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it took into account people being able to start attending conferences with their committees. Like, when you're doing your training this weekend, are you getting any compensation through Community Futures?
No, Community Futures has never provided any compensation.
Okay. So do you receive any compensation during your training at all?
No.
Okay.
Just, I guess part of this, sorry, I mean, the newly adopted policy, that would encompass that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so these kinds of things weren't happening before because of COVID. They're starting to come back now. So I think we're going to see more and more of these opportunities that people may choose to not take part in because they're either losing revenue or, you know. We'll see. I mean, we're just going to see how it rolls out as we go, right? And but that was my concern, that it may hamper people from saying, I'm going to go take advantage of this learning opportunity or this networking opportunity or this because I can't afford to do that.
But I guess that's something, like you said, that I think that we'll kind of see as it rolls out, right?
Yeah.
And we can always amend things if we need to.
Yeah.
Depending on how it actually works out in real life.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I just wanted to say, yeah, exactly that we could, I mean, it's a living policy, so it can always be amended in the future. And the other thing I wanted to say is that if you look at our statements from years ago, there's been a steady increase on the council remuneration over the years. So this truly is the highest it's ever been paid. So with the comment with the loss of revenue, I don't know, I have a hard time buying that simply because we've all made a decision to run for council, and that is a sacrifice, and going into it, we knew that what it would be, right? It's great to be compensated, but the fact that it's consistently gone up over the years, as well, you know, very much is a sacrifice of time to be a member of council. I think that.
And I agree with you, and for 14 years I've sacrificed time,
Mhm.
a lot of time, and a lot of hours. But one of the things that I became very increasingly conscious of the amount of revenue that I had sacrificed in order to be a part of council. And, you know, at some point we have to say, is this sustainable? And when we're looking at succession planning, are we going to attract young people in here that bring really great skills from really great careers? And, you know, if they say, I'm going to consistently be losing revenue when I'm taking part in things. And so I'm just asking us to be conscious of that, right, going forward when we make these kinds of policies.
All right, I'm gonna just bring us back to
Yes,
this,
bring it
but thank
back,
you, I
yes.
think that's great, we can, like I said, see how this goes, and then we can make amendments as need be to the remuneration policy.
No.
Okay, any discussion on this one? If there's none,
Would you like me
yes.
to restate?
Yes, please restate
Yes,
it.
please do.
I move that council approved Deputy Mayor Coalhurst to attend the CPAA conference, and I believe it's Leduc, on May 1st to 3rd this year.
I'll call the question, all in favor? That's carried, thank you. All right, is that the end of your report?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent, Councillor Caldwell, we'll go down to you.
Thank you. You know what, I have to give recognition to our administration staff, and I know that I have not written that in there, because I had just returned from Mexico and wanted to get this in for tonight. And so there's two different groups. One to the tireless volunteers of the Coalhurst Parks and Recreation Society for providing the free fitness classes. I have wanted to take part in Jesse's classes on Tuesday nights, and one of these days.
Not me, just.
Not you, Jessie. Lovely Jessie. She just got the most amazing energy. And their family movie nights, right, among many other events and recreation. And I also want to recognize Carlene Betteridge and the rest of our administration team for putting forward these kinds of forums for us to do. Thank you so much. I appreciate this process as I'm learning it. Meetings and events that I attended at Green Acres Foundation, February 22nd. I attended the regular board meeting, and then on February 24th, I attended a partnership exploration meeting through Green Acres. And on this morning, March the 7th, I also attended an SDA, and Deputy Mayor Poetry spoke to that already. I look forward to our planner coming in and spending some more time with us as we update our land use bylaws. Let's see what I have upcoming. The Wetlands Open House, I very much look forward to that, and I hope that we're getting some really great responses with the online survey. I just ask, please get out and share it to everybody. And hopefully everybody will also attend the open house. Green Acres Foundation Executive Committee on March the 15th, and then as well the Coalhurst Community Rec and Culture on March the 16th are my upcoming. And I have no other updates at this time.
Great, thank you. So I just have a couple of things here in terms of recognitions. I think that it's been said by everybody, but just thank you to the RCMP for the presentation yesterday. And I was so impressed by the number of people that came out. I think that you went to the one in the county last year, or the year before.
Yeah.
And our turnout was amazing. So I didn't really know what to expect, but it was really nice to see everybody and to have them, like I said yesterday, have people meet the people that are in our community and doing that for us. And so I think it was really great. And then again, with the provincial government, just wanted to echo Deputy Mayor Poetry's comments here too, just to thank the provincial government, specifically our MLA, Joseph Scow, for his continued support and advocacy for municipalities. And also, again, just really excited about our school upgrade and seeing what that looks like for us. Some of the meetings that I attended, I won't go through all of them. They will be in my report that will be listed in the minutes, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. One of which was I attended the Barons Eureka Warner Family and Community Support Services board meeting on March 1st. And one of the things that did come from the provincial budget is an additional $5 million allocation for FCSS. We're not really sure what that means in terms of our local funding, but that's something that I'm sure that they'll be reporting back on at our next meeting. The other thing that came out of this that I thought was actually really quite interesting is there's an organization in Edmonton called Drive Happiness. And so they started there basically it's a volunteer program where people will actually drive seniors to different appointments. And so that's something that's actually, they're spreading across Alberta at this point in time. And FCSS is actually utilizing Coalhurst and Coaldale as pilot projects for this, where they're looking at recruiting volunteers to actually provide that service for our residents and our seniors. And so I thought that, considering that this was something that was on the radar for us for quite a long time in terms of transportation, that it was really quite interesting that a model is being put forward. And so that's something that they're actually recruiting people to do that. As well as soon as that kind of happens, what they'll do is they'll start putting it out there, I think, to be getting clients for the actual program. So just really interesting about that. Yeah.
I think I've heard about this. Is that you're volunteer, but you do get compensated for your
Yes.
your fuel or something, right?
So the way that it works is that if it's up to 40 kilometers, the person is charged $10, and $8 of that goes towards the volunteer driver. And then anything on top of the 40 kilometers, if it's further than that, I think it's an extra 40 cents a kilometer they start being charged for that. But again, really interesting in terms of the sustainability of this project, in terms of like we don't have a bus or any type of thing. So for us, I thought, this is really great, that we can have this service here. We don't have to maintain a bus or anything like that. I know for some of the other communities, they had kind of expressed that they've already got transportation societies, and so they're kind of figuring out like how do they work with this as well? Do they partner with them? What does that actually look like? Because in a lot of ways, when I was kind of looking at this, it's kind of like a volunteer Uber program in some ways, right? Like you can kind of say like I need this, and rather than having to wait for a bus where you've got a lot of people and a schedule, this is kind of more catered to an individual. So I'll be interested to see how this goes, and we'll be getting more updates from FCSS as this goes on.
Is FCSS working with our local seniors?
I'm not sure who they're starting to work with. I think that they just announced that they're going to start looking for volunteers, but I would imagine that yes, that they'll be in touch with them.
I heard from someone that they're working with the Lethbridge Seniors Association right now.
Yes, because they're the ones that will actually be administering it. And so if anyone wants a ride, there's actually a form that goes through LSCO, and then they would do the arranging of the rides. So they're the intake people, but yeah.
That's really cool. It's really cool that they're doing it regionally. It's really cool that it's like user fees with volunteers and just a totally creative program that isn't going to, cost taxpayers money. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, I'm excited to see kind of what that looks like and how that can, like I said, better support our seniors in the community. The other one that I wanted to highlight here too was I was at Mayors and Reeves. And so we had Minister Nathan Needorf was there, as well as MLA Grant Hunter. And so they both were there and talked more about the provincial budget. And one of the things they talked about was the Alberta Municipal Water Wastewater Partnership Program, which is a program through the Ministry of Transportation. And they did actually mention that Lethbridge had recently applied for this program to get funding for it, but they were actually denied. And the reason why they were denied is because they did not take a regional approach. So they're really saying that this needs to be a regional approach to this in order to get funding. So that was kind of one of the tips that he put out there, which I thought was really interesting because we were talking about this a little bit. The other thing that came forward too that I didn't include in my report was that, just want to make sure that I have this worded right, but Minister Neudorf has actually been given he's been given the mandate to work on anything where there's multiple ministries that need to be involved in something. Mm-hmm. So if there's something where it's going to take, agriculture and I'm just making them all up. Whatever, it's gonna take all of them to come together to actually work on something. If we have something like that, if we go to him, he will actually be able to kind of pull them all together and get them to work on whatever that issue is. There was something that came forward about that, and it was regarding water. Just because one of the municipalities was talking about how, I think it was something like had to do with like a chicken production plant was established, but they didn't consult the municipalities who didn't have the water, and then all these things kind of happened from there, but really nobody was kind of coming together. And so he just had indicated that he would be able to do that. So I thought that was really good to know too.
I find that really interesting, the city of Lethbridge, because they have a very much regional approach. They provide us with treatment for our water, as well as our wastewater. Don't they also Coaldale? Is it Coaldale wastewater or?
I think it's though because we're looked at as customers. Like it's not that it's us all coming together, was kind of the impression that I got.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because if they're trying to do some kind of expansion on that to in to service, we may be looking at an increased cost regionally, right? If they're not receiving grant funds.
So, yeah, that was just kind of what had come forward, and that was what he'd indicated. But other than that, again, our CMP open house, which was excellent. And then upcoming meetings and events. The one thing that I did want to highlight again for everybody is the wetlands open house that will be next week. We had, like I said, great attendance yesterday, so hopefully we have that again next week. And I know that this is something that a lot of people are very excited about. And I had a couple of questions from people yesterday about it too, that they saw it in the town news. So just wondering, what it's going to be and what's kind of already set in place versus what they can do. So I'm looking forward to that next week.
Right.
Okay, so now we'll just move on to the administration reports. So starting with our CAO report. Would you like us to just go about asking questions on it, or is there anything you want to highlight?
No, the only thing I'd like to add is just a special thank you to Parks and Rec Committee. Last night they stepped up and provided a projector, which was of a much newer vintage than what the RCMP are currently working with. This one had USB and HDMI connectors. So perhaps a letter in support of the RCMP detachment getting a new projector might be in order. But appreciated the very fast response from Parks and Rec. Thank you, Mayor Montina, for stewarding that to get the projector forward.
Great. So is there any questions on the CAO report? Yes, go ahead.
So we have the update on the outdoor rink courts, but this is not the final. We're going to receive something else, I guess. Is my question really? Like, this is not the final. Like, we're
No,
on this. Okay.
thank
It's
you.
just a-
Through Mayor Montina to Deputy Mayor Patry. Yes, I was asked about both of these projects, just in a cursory, where are they at? For council's edification, I believe we had it on the March 28th committee of the whole meeting, where we're doing the bylaw, the land use bylaw update. I saw Councilor Florence, you were curious as to when that was coming. Yes. In that meeting as well, Mr. Lewis will be here to talk about funding for that as well as recycling, because council has asked that question. So these were just, again, cursory responses to questions that have been asked. Yes, you'll be given much more detail. Thank you.
Any other questions? If there's none, can I get a motion to accept?
I'll make that
motion. Oh,
I also wanted to, this is not a question, but it's a comment, I guess, that I really appreciate what our police officers have been doing, and especially in this update with the educational warning stickers. I think that's a great approach, and I just wanted to commend it.
All right, did you want to make that motion now?
I'll make that motion.
All right.
Okay, I'll make the motion to accept our CAO report. Accept the information, the CAO report as presented. Sorry, one of the challenges of I had cold is my eyesight is kind of a little bit impacted.
Any discussion?
Sorry, just that it's moved by Councillor Caldwell.
Excellent.
Supporting moved by.
Deb's name back all in favor? That's carried. All right, moving on now, we have some correspondence, versus a letter from the Honorable Rebecca Schultz on the budget update. And so is there any discussion on this item? Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I was happy to see the letter on there. I know we've talked about the provincial budget a bit tonight in different contexts, but it was good to see this letter. I know that when we've spoke in recent years with the changing of the MSI to the LGFF, we've had concerns. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it's our provincial government allocation for municipalities and all municipalities. So this budget year was super interesting, especially going into elections. And I have to be honest, I think it's a really great budget. I think that the Alberta government has listened to the concerns of the municipalities and responded in kind. There's been some changes to the MSI. We're getting an influx of off-grading, so that's to offset the new RCMP costs that now all municipalities pay, where in the past we didn't pay that, which was a concern that we talked about many times. We're to offset the loss of provincial ticket revenue, which I don't know if we'll see too much of that here, and then as well as the property tax requisition freeze. The capital remains the same, and the new funding model starts next year. As well as mentioned, there's been an announcement about this. So while I don't think it's perfect, I think that similar to some of our old policies, the MSI layout was flawed and needed some updating. So I think that the LGFF and the changes that they've made based on feedback from municipalities is an okay thing. We were talking about it before the meeting, but the removal of the 50% cap to 100% on the change in revenue, provincial revenue, will allow for greater revenue from the provincial government in good years. It also is a little bit risky because it would decrease that revenue as well. So we're in a good year now. We hope it continues. And then of course, as you mentioned, there's more money to libraries, there's more monies to the Land and Property Rights Tribunal, the reinstating of the fire services training. And overall, I think it's a great budget, and I applaud the provincial government for coming out with a solid and fiscally responsible plan.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on this?
Good years don't last that long. So, it's admirable that they want to share 100% of the risk now. It's also on us, I guess, to manage that responsibly now.
Sorry, just to clarify, that was a recommendation from Alberta municipalities to remove the cap.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
All right, if there's no further discussion, can I get somebody to make a motion to accept this for information? Go ahead.
I move that we accept the letter from the Honorable Rebecca Schultz as information.
Excellent. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That's carried. And the next letter that we have here is from Farm Safety Center. And so last year, I believe, at probably the same time, we received a letter from them requesting a donation. I am not sure what we provided last year, but if anyone is interested in making a motion on this. If not, then would somebody like to make a motion to accept it for information?
I'll make that motion. I move to accept the, how do we have it worded here? The letter from Farm Safety Center for information.
Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? That's carried. And we don't have anything in closed session tonight, and so we'll move right to adjournment. So can I get a motion to adjourn at 7:34 p.m.?
I'll make that motion. I move that we adjourn at 7:34 p.m.
Excellent. Call the question, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much.